my world, Carl, which is also your world. We've been sharing this for a while now, even though we didn't know one another. This podcast is essentially all about the gray area, the colorful gray area, as you have described it. That is the intersection between art, magic, and culture. So what you have called occulture, very aptly. And you're a person who has influenced me immensely. I don't know if I would have turned my first interview that I did for this series into a series if it wasn't for your example that I found in Resonances of your other books. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to hear.
And I will just do a very brief introduction of who you are for those that are not aware of your work. I hope these are very few. So you have been traversing that intersection, that colorful intersection, there and back again for 30 years now or more. Correct me if I'm wrong. And everyone who has worked with you so far describes you as a visionary writer, filmmaker, and magician. I completely agree with that opinion. I think you're a very visionary force. You have been the luminary of the OTO, Ordo Templi Orientis, the Illuminates of Thanateros, and perhaps more importantly than all of this, Temple of Psychic Youth, of course. And I would describe you, if I may, as the magical child of occultural heroes such as Anton LaVey, of course, Kenneth Anger, and the giant that was and is Genesis Breyer Peerage. I don't think, spirits like that ever disappear. He's still with us. I'm going to use the pronoun he to refer to Genesis throughout because you have written that this is how you've known him. So I feel I should use that. And you have engaged with what I do here, which is interviewing artists and occultists for a very long time, producing some brilliant works. Some of these are shared in this lovely book that I have here, Resonances. And others are in the mode of film. So you've done conversations with Kenneth Anger, focusing on his work. You have done Into the Devil's Den about Anton LaVey. What brought me to you in the first place was Genesis, actually. This is how I picked the first book that I read by you, which was Occulture. Went through it at Dreadwell's bookstore at the time, I remember, 2018. And I saw that you had been involved in Topi. There was like a whole chapter on Genesis, alongside other things that I was very much into. So I picked up that book, thanks to Genesis, who was actually supposed to be interviewed by me as well for the second episode of this podcast. Shortly after they passed, very sadly. So that spirit has been present throughout between us. And through picking up occulture, I immersed myself into your world. And what I discovered was an author that I feel profound resonance with on many levels, on all levels, really, on the level of what attracts me in the occult world, when it comes to writing, because we both describe ourselves as writers first and foremost. Music, passion for music, literature, film, everything was there. So I feel a bit like you describe in your Resonances book, where Kenneth Anger says about Aleister Crowley that he never met him, but he feels like he profoundly knows him. And I feel the same about you, even though we don't really know each other, thanks to your books. And you have inspired and continue to inspire me daily, really. And I hope that everyone who watches this feels the same and draws the same inspiration from this.
Thank you very much. That's a great introduction.
My pleasure. And without further ado, I will just go straight into the interview. And I will start with something that you said in our other interview that we did for Watkins. You said that you see yourself primarily as a writer, so a writer first and an occultist second. Why is that?
Well, it's you could say on one level it has to do with sustenance. I make my living as a writer, so in that sense, professional vocation. But it's more than that also, and it is for me very tied into the magical or the occultural stuff, because in the very beginning, when I was about to almost grow up, when parents and everybody said that, it's time to do something beyond the fanzines. And so I ventured into journalism. I went to journalism school, from which I eventually dropped out because I didn't want to be one of those newspaper people, where you basically have a template that you have to fill with daily, stuff. I think, formatted on a deep level very early on, in the sense that I had been immersed in culture of a kind that inspired me, and I was a good little detective, trying to find out what had inspired the authors or artists that had inspired them, and making a kind of a web or a network of stuff. It could be literature or music or whatever, but I've always been one who goes beyond the first attraction in a way, and tries to see what's behind, in order to just go deeper into enjoying whatever art or literature that I get exposed to. So when I started doing fanzines, which was then about music, trashy films and rock and roll, which was like in the mid 80s, I think that was my real education in a way, because I've always been doing some kind of printed matter. I've always had like a publishing company. I've always written stuff that is basic journalism, but it's always been my own in a way, and I've contextualized it in other forms. Certainly I've sold pieces to magazines and stuff, but it's mostly been my own projects, like the book, or the video series, for instance, An Art Apart, and the book that's called Different People, which is basically just anthologies of me talking to artists about their work and what inspired them, etc., etc. So it's me as a professional, but it's also me as me. I can't make a separation there. So in that sense, when the subcultural interest drifted into the occultural interest and also the occult interest, I think for me, my psychology or my foundation is to be very inspired, very hungry, then taking all of this stuff in, seeing what's good for me and what's not good for me, and then making my own stew in a way. And then I immediately, or not immediately always, but very often I want to share what I have found. Some things I've kept like a secret because it feels better to be a secret, but most of the stuff that I have come across, like for instance, meeting a cool rock band, then I've done an interview or taken the pictures, or later on with the occult people, I've talked about occult stuff with them and sort of written about their take on this or that, or written about historical occultism. Basically, I think I am I wouldn't go so far as say as I'm the voice of my generation, but I'm one voice of my generation to, again, not repackage, but simply to formulate so that other people can take part of something that is usually kind of complex, symbol-laden, obfuscated for many different reasons, as we know, mainly for self-preservation during times of persecution and the Inquisition and la da da. But basically, I think that's my function in a way, to delve into these quite difficult territories. And basically, I would not go so far as to say I make them pop, but more easily accessible in a way. And also thereby contextualizing and seeing little dots or red threads in between people. And yeah, I've called it magico-anthropology. I think it's a good term. And then there's the occulture. I think that's a great term. And that's really... So to return to your question, I think I am an author with these interests, but on the other hand, I am also a magician who writes. So it is kind of hard to separate sometimes, because I also, in terms of my magical experiences and sort of connecting to my unconscious or subconscious for creative purposes, it very much comes from the technique of writing. I can certainly sit and meditate or come up with ideas in hypnagogic or hypnopompic states of mind, but it very much comes when I'm actually sitting down and writing. That's when I'm most lucid in a way, most free-flowing. So I would say that the writing is a vocation, it's a profession, it's an identity, but it's also very much a tool for me, or a working structure in my pursuit of, occult knowledge or whatever we want to call it.
That's a very beautiful answer. There's a number of things that I feel a deep resonance with. We have an interesting mirroring in the sense that I also come from the field of journalism. I also come from the field of literature, but I was employed for a long time like as a journalist. And I really felt for you when you said, this is me doing the interviews as a professional, but also this is me. And I cannot separate between the two. And most people today, they have to live in this sort of severance.
Yeah.
Where there is even a series about that, very similar to The Prisoner that you've mentioned
right.
in your book many times, where basically people live in this fake world where basically the real self has to be left behind in this kind of Orwellian society, right? But you cannot be, in my experience, you cannot be a magician and not live according to that path. You have to walk the talk very much. And this is something that you do. This is something that I also realized and I had to do. I had to leave journalism because it was not a true path for me, and I could not be myself while I was doing these interviews, which is the opposite of what we're doing here.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think also it's very good. I mean, so we share that attitude, and we should be very happy and very grateful that we're living in free cultures, like free societies where we can actually, focus on doing what we want to do without any, major oppression or threats of violence or whatever. Because during our talk, the Watkins evening, you asked me about Ernst Jünger and the figure of the anarch, not the anarchist, but the anarch. And Jünger was so good in formulating that, both in philosophical writings, but also in novels like Oymesville, for instance, where someone who is in a very oppressive structure, oppressive society, yet maintains that freedom to think. And of course, you and we can be free in expressing ourselves and having podcasts and publishing books. And, it's a wonderful thing. And I hope that we will never have to experience something else. But of course, human beings are fantastic and they can maintain that sort of magical persona of free creativity and sticking to your own vision. But sometimes you have to do it under a cloak, and that's essentially the history of occultism, isn't it? Where today we can talk about this as being, proto-science or pioneering philosophy. And now, the sciences are catching up a little bit. But this is a fairly new thing because only, say 150 years ago and further back is like been persecution and oppression and ostracizing and very dangerous things, simply because of the fact that some people actually stood up and said, no, you may believe in what you believe in, but I have my own evidence for the fact that it's like this, whether it has to do with the structure of the cosmos or the philosophy of will or whatever it is. There are always people who come up with new things, and they are not popular because they rock the boat. They disturb the balance or the status quo that other people are very keen to keep in place. But again, times have changed. And I think what we're seeing today is like a very strong immersion or an influx of, we could call it occultism in a way, but the word occulture has sort of, pushed that aside. It's a much more convenient word, I think. I have called it also the process in itself, occulturation. In anthropology general, there's this term acculturation, where some new patterns of behavior go into a different culture. But the occulturation is simply this thing that things that have existed beneath the surface, they have enough nutrients, they have enough water, and now they need the sunlight to pierce the crust of the earth and just grow into beautiful flowers or forests or whatever. And this is happening right now, according to me, because of the fact that human beings are very, very smart, but they're also incredibly self-destructive. So it's not that we're going to destroy the earth. That's kind of impossible, but we are certainly going to destroy our own habitat. And then, whether it's cockroaches or, new dinosaurs, whatever, we'll see. It doesn't matter. The earth will be fine, but we are not fine. So the reason, according to me again, why all of this, influx of magic thematically or in behavioral changes, simply because we need to reconnect. And that's the sort of the title of I guess, the most recent book, the Source Magic book.
I will just show it for a second so that then everyone can recognize it, looks for it. This is wonderful.
Yeah, and that concept is simply kind of a holistic shamanic approach to it, that we are not separate. In separation comes disease, and that's exactly what we're experiencing now in a very traumatic way. But we just need to reconnect to greater nature, to realize that we're all in this together. And if we want to survive, we need to change our behavior, because essentially Mother Nature doesn't care about us. We're part of it right now, but whether we're here tomorrow or not doesn't matter. Because it will just be a rebalancing of energies, and new life forms will emerge. As it's always been like that, and we're so hubristic that we think that we can just grab what we can and not have any effect. So in that sense, my work it's a kind of a different work, right? Because that I've been writing a lot about things, about magicians, about phenomena and stuff like that. But I think I'm changing a little bit now into going more into theory, writing about, you could call it magical philosophy in a way, and trying to again formulate for a new crowd, a new audience, perhaps even a new generation, to think about these things. That's always the first step, right? I will never tell people what to do. That goes against my philosophy, but I am going to voice my voice and express whatever I feel is relevant, and hopefully some people will catch hang on to that and see if it makes sense to them. Then it's great. Unfortunately, I do not believe in any kind of mass enlightenment. I think we're going to go into deeper and darker times before it changes. If it ever changes, we'll see. But that said, I am very happy to be here. It's a privilege and a luxury to sit with you and talk about these things and be able to examine these things and feel the passion and joy of so countless generations before us who have worked with these things, whether it's in alchemical labs or in shamanic forests, or examining the mind expansion of plants and mushrooms and poetry and all these things. I think we're working very much in a unbroken tradition of, you could call it magicians, for lack of a better term. And of course, there will always be magicians. I think today, the time that we're living in right now, with the kind of occulture we have, will change the direction of human culture in general. And I think the very, very inert, death-driven cultures that we have, unfortunately very powerful still, perhaps they need to die. Perhaps they need to go 100% inert so that there could be new seed coming up. That's also happened. All empires have crumbled. All big structures have crumbled. And when people get fed up, there are revolutions, etc. History, of course, is the most magical thing there is, because we can see what's happened before, and by realizing certain basic behavioral patterns, we can say that, well, this will very likely happen again, because human beings haven't really changed that much.
And history, I completely agree with everything that you said. And also history is like a Webit Safe, right? It's been rewritten constantly. Everybody is weaving together. And if we continue to be hubristic on this planet where everything is connected, at one point, it can overwrite our thread. The way we overwrite threads on the web, and we delete and we replace and we manipulate, the same can happen to us. And that is in my opinion, it's not our only hubris that we destroy the environment. It's also, particularly for the Western world, our other big hubris is that we do not, we take everything for granted. We take this freedom that we have, for example, to speak about these things for granted. And it's really not. For me as a Greek, these times of oppression and persecution, they're not that far back. Growing up, I constantly had to fight with the establishment around me, especially at school, to be myself. And I was persecuted because I was openly wearing satanic emblems, for example. Or I would refuse to go to prayer, and I had the really valid arguments about not joining that, which I was not afraid to express. But that always came at the cost of being the scapegoat, of guarded by your teachers, for example, as somebody who is problematic and aggressive or not willing to conform. Even as an older person, I was told by somebody that I was too insubordinate, somebody in a higher position, which for me, from where I come from ideologically, that's a compliment. I don't want to be somebody who can be managed. Right. But in society at large, this attitude has not changed. And we think that we are free, but we are not really. It's very precarious, this sort of freedom that we have. And there was someone who came from a very religious background who told me, again at a workplace, that about our ideas, that maybe we're just allowed for now to speak openly because they want us to emerge so that they know who we are and take us down. That was chilling for me to hear, because I felt on some level it might be true.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't think so. I think that what will happen, again, the reason why all of this is emerging now is because it's needed. I very rarely feel attracted to conspiracy theories where it's like them, the unknown, or I think human beings are either pushed or pulled. And small groups of people with some kind of so-called power can certainly push and pull people, but I don't feel that there's an encompassing all-powerful entity that can decide on everything. I mean, the situation today politically shows that fairly well, but then of course you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, etc., and how close are the leaders to actually together, and but it makes for interesting contemporary history, that's for sure. I think again that the internet is an interesting and relevant, I was going to say symbol, but it's not a symbol, it's a real thing, in the sense that it allows for this free flow of information and sharing ideas in a way, but at the same time it's also the perfect monitoring surveillance tool. Because of course, if someone were all-encompassing and could see all of the internet and find all the information, then you can see that, oh, Lena and Carl, they had this conversation. They seem to be really bad people, or really good, who knows? So in that sense, everything today seems to be quite extreme. It's a pendulum swinging so quickly that we can't see it because it's going so fast. So the draconian measures and the self-expression, they coexist in a way. We can travel. Again, people in the UK and Scandinavia and the Western world, basically, we can travel wherever we want to go, but it's not traveling in the sense to be free. We are constantly monitored by, swiping our passports, paying with our credit cards, tracking our phones that are probably listening to us all the time, even when they're turned off. So it's a kind of, it seems to be a price we have to pay for this kind of extreme freedom that we actually have. And I, for one, think that it's worth it. When I was younger, maybe a little bit more hard-edged, in my philosophy of will and kind of the individual, and again the integrity of the anarch. Maybe I would have been not so positive about this extremity that we're passing through. But now I think that why not? It's an experiment. We are all co-creating, because this conversation that we're having, it's going to be listened to by people, and maybe it will affect some people in a very good way, and that makes it worth it in a way, because the butterfly effect, everything moves on forever, and if we can sow some good seed for people to take into their own soil, and who knows what might emerge. And there I think we're living in a culture where quantity is actually quality. You see the influencers, how many followers do you have? I have 1 million. Well, I have 1,100,000. So that's a quality in itself. And that said, I think the more platforms there are, the more avenues for our expression, and of course we have to work hard with it too, the better it is for these sort of positive, affirmative energies to come through. Then the fact that this is just a tiny fraction of something that to me is just pollution, it's just noise, no signal, then I don't care, because I don't have to listen to the noise if I don't want to.
Yes.
So it is kind of this expression they have in America, to be a kid in a candy store. We have so many options, so much to choose from, and so many great people to talk to. So it's just a matter of our own, curation. We have to curate our own reality in a way. And that to me is very, very magical.
Mm-hmm. I want to go back a bit to roots, because you mentioned how during your youth, you were more like a hard edge in terms of the concept of the anarch. I spoke about my youth a bit. So I want to go back to your roots as the magician and the author Carl Abrahamsson. When was there ever a specific moment, a defining moment, when you realized that you were a magician as well as an author, as well as an artist? When did that realization that art has a magical power and that magic is a form of art occur for you?
I think if we want to talk about really sort of crystallizing moments, I had been exposed to and also actively immersed myself in a culture, whether, underground culture, whatever, in terms of comics and books and films and music, that were sort of, there was a bit of philosophy in there. There was something, psychedelic or something sexual, liberating in a way. But that could just be seen as culture that attracted me. But if we talk about these really crystallizing sort of magical moments, that would probably come through the early 80s, when there was this musical scene called, the industrial music scene, or this very experimental music scene that also carried a lot of philosophical weight through its references. Philosophies, magicians, artists influenced these bands and thinkers who made new music, but not to make just another 3-chord, 3-minute pop song, but to make new and really groundbreaking music. This really appealed to me a lot. And I would say that Throbbing Gristle were on my radar. And then, of course, when they drifted into psychic TV and actually had the Temple of Psychic Youth, this for me was like, whoa, what's going on here? Someone is actively working with magic in a contemporary sense, not like, the Golden Dawn or the Freemasons or the OTO, where it's basically carrying on in a quasi-Freemasonic structure, tradition, yet with some more, slightly more magic thrown in. But this was something new, and there was also the IoT that I learned about slightly later. And that blew my mind, because these were real living people making art together, but not art for art's sake or for a career as an artist, but to make something happen. So I would say that, listening to those first psychic TV albums, Force the Hand of Chance and Dreams Less Sweet, 82 and 83, that made me want to be involved somehow. So I became what was called then a subscriber to information from the Temple of Psychic Youth. So, you could buy some little booklets and stuff or the records from them. And there was always so much to take in and go through, and it was highly inspiring because of this crossover. An active crossover, and it was not abstracted, it was not academic, it was not too highbrow. It was just like, hey, let's do this, let's use music and let's make new music that works with energies and frequencies in new ways. An immersive system of using the media that was available at the time, not necessarily cups and daggers and wands and discs and robes, even just like very hardcore. Get to the hardcore of what magic is, try to formulate it, and also, very important, sharing it. It was, it's another essay, I think that's hasn't been published yet, but I wrote something about Topi coming from this environment of DIY, meaning do it yourself, from the punk scene, where you share information, you make fanzines, and you spread information around, whether it's about a certain kind of music or hardcore magic. That affected me greatly also. Doesn't matter if you can't publish lavish art books, just make a fanzine instead. It will find its way to the right people. So again, to return to your question, I think those early psychic TV records, and there were a lot of other people also, made me realize that it was a contemporary thing. It was not something that was in the past, like with Crowley or Eliphas Levi and these almost mythical people. There were real people working with this today, and I immediately felt that I wanted to be engaged in that, and that's why I did become involved with the Temple of Psychic Youth, and that led to many connections, and my own is like a springboard to go out into the world as a magician. And as you know, I was welcomed into environments that were only fantasies for me.
Yes. Yeah,
and it was just like, whoa, what's happening now? and it basically, what it all comes from, I wouldn't describe it, to destiny or something. It's just the fact that I was really proactive. If I wanted to talk to someone, I did knock on the door. No emailing back then, of course, but I was really sort of an active networker, and that led me to America, to meeting LaVey, to meeting Kenneth Anger, and to meeting a lot of other people at a fairly young and inexperienced age. And it sort of it shook me. You shook my life to the foundation, and I realized that I cannot go down the rabbit hole of normality. Is just not worth it. And I've been on that path ever since. And sometimes of course I've worked and stuff like that to pay the bills, but the main thing has always been carrying on in this tradition. I am the carrier of sort of like many different currents that have come into me, and now I feel that it's very much my responsibility not only to pay it back by writing stuff about them, but also paying it forward in formulating my own thoughts for the future.
Yeah, you're like a crossroader. You're a point where these currents meet, and you carry them all very well in a very eclectic manner. You mix them together and you come up with something that is your own, I would say.
Yeah,
and
I hope so. Yeah,
definitely. And I don't particularly like using the term destiny either. However, there is something about all this that feels like it's destiny, in the sense that if you were not someone who was already on the same frequency, because in magic and art, frequency and energy, attraction matters, right? You attract what you are, really. So on the same channel, the same frequency. So this is why. And you reached out actively, like you said. And I remember you write in Resonances, when you speak of these experiences at some point with Topi specifically, and you say that it was an early form of the internet in a way. Changes with tapes, with fanzines, with like letters.
Yeah.
It was done online, but it was an early form of that sort of networking to create a subculture. And it's very sad that now today's youth does not engage like in creating subcultures anymore. Everything is online, and it's more about broadcasting like a persona or an avatar rather than
exactly. I think also that I mentioned briefly the relationship between signal and noise. We are living today in a world, an existence of noise, basically, but we're smart, we can find the signal. But back then, when this sort of initial networking was going on, it was all postal, occasionally a telephone, and slightly later on a fax, but it was mostly postal. And in a postal networking, you have all signal. It was very rarely you got something that was, oh, this is not so interesting. Everything you got was interesting because it was sent with someone who cared about what you were to receive. Whereas now it's just so flimsy and ephemeral in a way that it's just evanescent noise. But anyway, I don't want to sound like I'm nostalgic. I think there are people today working with stuff that I simply don't understand, and I'm thinking AI, for instance. I think there are many interesting magical usages of artificial intelligence. I doubt that I will go into them. I'm very content with just being me and working with what I have. And what I have, except besides my history and my capacity in a way, is also these different forms of expression that you could call artistic. I like to take pictures, I like to make films, I love to make music, and I will carry on doing these things to sort of balance out the writing, which can be very mental, very intellectual in a way. So I have that, and I feel very happy with that because it's something that I have worked with all my life. But strangely enough, it might have to do with age. I don't feel the hunger or sort of impatience to go, oh, I need to start working with AI, or any other technological thing, because it would just take me down another rabbit hole that might not be conducive to what it is I'm trying to do.
No, I don't think it's a matter of age at all. I'm younger than you. I grew up in the 90s. However, as you speak, the similarities are uncanny, and I think it's a matter of resonance. Like in Greece, I got into magic through the same avenues that you mentioned. It was not industrial music so much for me. We didn't have that so much. We had black metal and gothic metal, this type of bands. Many of them had very deep, like philosophical lyrics, mentioning, like making intertextual references to several authors from the Renaissance to the modern avant-garde, or they would openly espouse the Promethean Luciferian ideal. Yeah, they would live that with their art and with this like very much DIY mentality. We had the band Rotting Christ in Greece. We still have them, thankfully. With nothing, they started from nothing. With the fanzines, with this type of DIY culture that you mentioned, and they made something out of nothing in a country where the mentality even now is very conservative and not conducive. People who are like me and you would be very isolated, were very isolated in such a milieu. So I think it's not a matter of age at all. It's a matter, again, of what attracts you, how you like to work with your energy, what you resonate with. And I think, if you're a sensitive individual, if you see yourself as an antenna, someone who is a transmitter and receiver of a message, you know that this has to do with your being human, like your deepest, your soul, really. You won't let that to a machine to take over. Mm-hmm. I believe that's why you don't orientate yourself towards those technologies. And I know many people who are younger and they also feel the same. They feel very alienated by what is happening. Yeah, absolutely. So you spoke before about the anarch. Mm-hmm. Very important concept. You mentioned it several times in relation to Ernst Jünger, but also to yourself in the book Source Magic. But I also believe I saw it in Resonances, which was just years ago. We spoke about that in our previous interview, but I would like to go a bit deeper into that here because it's important. I have a lot of people in my audience which are they are from the US, and sometimes they're not exposed so much to European ideas and terminology. So what is the difference between an anarch and an anarchist? And why do you identify as an anarchist?
Yeah, I think it has to do a lot with an aspect of the philosophy of will. And we can trace it back a long time, but usually, it's Schopenhauer that influenced Nietzsche, and Nietzsche influenced basically all of 20th century philosophy, including the magical syncretists like Aleister Crowley, for instance, and also Austin Spare and many others were deeply affected by Nietzsche, who was deeply affected by Schopenhauer. And in the philosophy of will, there is of course an incentive or an encouragement to what Carl Jung called to individuate. You have to become a full individual and go through these things, and not baptisms of fire, but you have to go through this the turmoil of being a human being in order to sort of shake off morals that have no meaning, in a way, simply to become a more clearly defined human being, an individual. Whether you go down a magical route or not, it is magical in itself, I think, to individuate. So I think that Jünger was very much a Nietzschean, and he could see very clearly from, also importantly, from his own experience, exciting times in Europe at the time, mostly in a catastrophic sense. But he was, a soldier in the First World War, and he was part of the, enthusiasm of the 1920s, when they call them conservatives, but they were kind of radical, tried to create something new, and out of that environment came the Nazis and stuff like that, that basically destroyed so much of culture and philosophy and European peace and what have you. So he had that experience, and he was also a soldier and an author during the Second World War. So he had both these world wars, and also the paranoia during the Third Reich, and also the paranoia afterwards when Germany was divided, etc. And he had this tendency to see things very loftily, from a bird's eye perspective, and clothe it in more general philosophical terms, mythical terms almost. And that's one of the appeals about him for me. But the anarch is very different from the anarchist. The anarchist is like has an epiphytic, maybe even symbiotic relationship to the power. Whether the power is good or bad, that's just a point of view, a matter of opinion. But there will always be the person who violently goes against, saying that this is wrong, we need to change this, but seldom from a constructive point of view, not like someone who wants to play in the same field, play the same game in a way, but just, destroy whatever. And the anarchist is that person. They can't really be on their own. They need something to oppose, something to clash against, and eventually also something to be destroyed by, because the power always wins. And if you talk about that's not true, you have revolutions, yes, but the revolutionaries very quickly become the new conservatives, the new power in a way. So it seems like that the spirit of power is always the same. An anarch, on the other hand, can work within this structure, yet remain free, because he or she has the inner world. And that's where it's so magical in a way, because no one can take your inner experience away from you as long as you're alive. You can be imprisoned, you can work a dreary corporate job, you can be in a prison camp, or sit in jail, whatever, all these horrible things that people do to each other. But you can still be free. You can retain that integrity of your own individual self. And that is what the anarch is. And there's so many beautiful things in Oymersville, for instance, the great novel, where the person works as a steward or a waiter or a cocktail mixer, whatever, for this ruling elite in a way. So he has great insight in what's going on, but it doesn't really interest him in any other way than to, escape being, engaged in it. So he has this little hideout out in nature where he goes simply to be alone. And that is something that I like very much also, that thing he builds a little hut or something. In my source magic concept, we need to get physically back out into nature, just, hug a tree. It sounds ridiculous, but it's not. Lie on the grass, smell a flower, all these sort of hippie-ish things. It's a matter of survival, actually, to reconnect to that kind of much greater energy. And you can say that the vibration is higher or lower. It doesn't matter. You just need to expose yourself to it.
Yeah.
And from a philosophical anarchic point of view, the anarch is always free, because there's no connection to the power or the oppressor, except for what is very superficial, like a working relationship or a contract or something like that. You can be free still, but an anarchist can never let go of the power. Yeah.
Absolutely. I know that Resonances, in the beginning, there was another working title, and that was Desinvolture, I think, and which means to be desinvolté, to be kind of detached and still,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So that's the same then as being an anarch.
Yeah, and that's also a term, that desinvolture, that Jünger used a lot. And for me, it has also appeared from other angles, from other perspectives, from other directions in a way, in my love for and my admiration of Taoism. You say that's a Chinese philosophy or a Chinese religion, or also Chinese magic, but you could just remove the Chinese and say it is what it is. It's Taoism, and this again, non-attachment. It's only when you're attached to something that you get drawn in to the point where it will sooner or later create problems for you. It could be human relationships. It could be stuff that you think is worthwhile, but turns out it isn't. And in a way, desinvolture for me is the same as this concept of wu wei, to do things, but to not really have to think about what you're doing. It's just like a free flow where you don't feel anxiety and attachment to something because it needs to be done. Everything gets done sooner or later. You just have to, allocate energy and see how the energies move. So for me, Taoism is very connected to that kind of Jungerian spirit in a way, and it's I feel it's very present in my life. And it's also a great magical approach. This thing where in the Western system, we're so used to, like I said before, pushing or pulling. You push some force or you pull some force. It's just kind of a violent, causal thing, saying, do this for me, or, I want this. And it's like little kids playing in a way, whereas in fact, if you're completely still and centered and think about something in a focused way, that thing will happen. And, it's all about frequency, vibration, but it's also about maturity and learning through history, which could also be your own history, what works and what doesn't work. And LaVey wrote about that also. He called it the balance factor. It's, deep sense of self-knowledge that, you can only do magic as far as you're capable of. You can't I can't stop the earth. I can't make the world spin the other way around. That's would require a magic that I'm not capable of. But I can create an interesting and inspiring life for myself and thereby for others.
It is, as you said, it's about the balance, knowing yourself, knowing your context. That's very important. Not the only one. Like if we take the web of weird as like an example of how this word works, I think it's a very apt symbol that the ancient Scandinavians had. The Norns weave the largest powers in the universe. We do individually, but sometimes we forget in our eagerness to attract something or manifest something that everything around us does that as well. And you have to take those balances of power into account and navigate. It's mostly about navigating, I think. You spoke about how being an anarch means that you retain your inner freedom, because this is something, if you focus in your core, inside, in the stillness inside, this is something that cannot be taken away from you. You have also written that one's own vision and inner process can only be threatened if expressed unwisely. What does that mean? What does it mean to express that vision unwisely? When does this happen?
Well, I think today I would answer it as when you're a young magician, sometimes you formulate the intention or the desire or whatever that you feel you want to achieve through a ritual, for instance. And you do your best and you formulate it, and those words or the symbol or your inner formulation then goes out via the ritual into the cosmos, or whatever you want to call it, the web of word. And sometimes when we're young, I should add, we're eager, and we think that we want that thing.
Yes.
But maybe we don't actually. It could be a superficial thing or something that appeals in the moment because we're not situated, we're not fully individuated. However, it is also from our mistakes that we learn. So it's important to go through these things. And I think I'm still making those kinds of mistakes in a way where I focus too much on a detail without seeing what the detail is connected to in my deeper self, my unconscious in a way, or my deeper desires, because maybe it's not right to try to push, for instance, one little person that I perceive is important in my bigger picture to do something that fits my existential puzzle, when in fact I could reformulate it more wisely and simply say that I would like for this issue to be resolved. Then how the magical forces or the gods or the whatever we call it, how they solve that for me, I don't even have to know. The main thing is that it is solved, So I think the unwise expression is simply the expression that is a little bit unthought through, too fast, too young, too detailed. The big picture is better, what do you want in life, or if there is an acute issue that needs to be fixed, then focus on fixing the issue, not about specifically how it needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I guess it also has to do with how many people, especially as you said, when they're younger, they confuse their true will, with wants and desires of the moment, and thinking the long-term bigger picture. What is it that you truly want to represent? What is it that you truly want to work on?
Yeah, exactly.
One day, right? You have said that at the core of the highest expressions of magic and art lies the vision of belonging to oneself. And that takes me to my next question. One of the people who definitely embodied that is obviously Genesis Breyer periods. It was all about changing oneself ex-dream. Can we talk about that a bit more? What does it mean to remake oneself ex-dream?
We worked on a few really long-term projects together, like the interviews that became the book Sacred Intent, and some musical projects. And I guess at one point I asked the question, what are you about? And Jen said, after thinking a while, change itself, So it's like a thing in itself that is almost, I was going to say an end in itself, but maybe not an end in itself, but something that was, anyway, very, very important, and we could see it throughout Jen's career, experience from early performance art over the existentialism of Throbbing Gristle, the magical enthusiasm of Topi and Psychic TV, and later on in the US, the collaboration on the pandrogyny experiment with his wife, and then at the last phase, sort of as an artist, simply working in New York and having shows and stuff like that. Through all these phases, we're not only seeing, changing major projects, like Throbbing Gristle was one project and Psychic TV was another. That's just normal in the life of an artist. But it was quite interesting to see the surface, the outer expression change so much. And I'm not only talking about, body type and changes like that. That's also normal. But in terms of sartorial things, clothing and appearance and what you focus on your outer, because that also affects people, and thereby that's a magical ritual also. And then, of course, you did have the pretty extreme things going on in the Pandrogyny project, where Jen and his wife did a substantial amount of cosmetic surgery to try to look like each other, in a way, to create a third kind of being and see what happened. And that kind of approach to see what happens is what I call a proto-scientific one. And Jen had that very much. And I think a great number of insights came from the transcendence from the former state to the new state. When Jen shifted shape, in a way, not only shifted projects, but also shifted shape, that sets energy free. That's also something that I've written about. The transcendence is very, very important. And sometimes transgression can also be a transcendence. But in Jen's case, to an extent, I think it was constructed and strategized, saying, I would like to work more with this from a magical point of view. I'll make this changes in my approach or in my appearance, and we'll see where that goes. But I think also it lay deeper than that, deeper psychological levels, because people with creativity can take different kinds of expressions. Some people are, shy, or they like to write.
Yeah.
Some people they need to be on stage and have all the attention, and I think Jen was a little bit of both of those extremes, but it was definitely that kind of demanding attention going on, and that's what makes for great artists in that sense, like bands and performing artists, and that was definitely there. But at the same time, brilliant philosopher, writer, poet, of course. So there was a bit of both. And I think that what I mean is that it wasn't all construction, like deciding by the desk, what comes next. It might have been like that in terms of certain philosophical ideas that Jen wanted to take on, repackage, and move out in the world. Yeah. People usually talk about him as a cultural engineer, in a way, feeling with the antenna what's going on, taking it in, seeing, is it worth something for me? Yeah, I'll do this, we'll weave it into this musical project, or in the Pandrogyny project, and then maybe something will happen, and to often the antennae were right. Jen was good at seeing what was going on in the zeitgeist and then taking that down in a way and working with it. So in that sense, there was a lot of change all the time. I mean, some people are just the same all through their life, and they're very happy like that. So I guess maybe it has to do with astrology. It certainly has to do with psychological fundamentals. Yes. Deep needs that need to be met. Some people are very happy to be on their own. Other people need to be on a stage. And Jen, I would say, was more of the latter.
Yeah, it's, I guess, the way one feeds, themselves, the way they absorb energy. Some people are fed by the inner process, introverted people, some others, the interaction with an audience, and some are in the middle, like ambivert, I guess. You could fit in that category.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, I see Genesis and Lady J as Protean, because they were always concerned with being malleable, with shifting identities. And that was, like you said, a very positive thing, this transgression, transcendence of even the limits of your own physical body to merge with another being. However, I have to say that today around me I see maybe way too much malleability and shifting identities, but in a way that it no longer inspires joyful and empowering feelings for me. I see the essence of it having become a bit like a newspeak, where we have love and unlove, we have lie and unlie. Now, like online, you will see people constantly shifting the way they look, their appearance. You see them transitioning and detransitioning, and at the same time being very sensitive about anything that is unpleasant. For example, you cannot use anymore online the word kill. You have to use unalive. If that's not used, what is? So this quality of being like Protos and transforming that Genesis and Late had, now it has changed into something that I would see more like being a chameleon in the sense of Plato's Alcibiades. I don't know if you are familiar with that work. It's about somebody in ancient Greece who basically he had no allegiances. He had no core identity, and I think something very different, isn't it? It's not the same thing anymore. One of the things that Genesis used to say was, look at what people do, as you quoted many times, and do the exact opposite. So now, would the radical thing today, taking all of this into consideration, be to be conservative? Actually, I don't know. What do you think?
No, that's very interesting. I think I can give a good answer to that, simply because it's been my own experience over these past weeks, basically. And it's just like, very contemporary, kind of boring stuff, but it has changed me in a very good way. And it has to do with the fact that I, like most people today, used to always have my cell phone on me. And for practical reasons, I had it in my trouser pocket. And then it was this irritating thing, and I couldn't charge it anymore. Big panic. It might die. And then basically I took it to an electronic store, and they helped me clean the little hole for the power plug, because it's just like had tissue from my pant pockets, basically. Wow. Gradually. So anyway, that's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story was that it made me think, wow, we know for a fact, at least my wife and I do, that they're listening. Like when we're talking about certain things, then we see ads for that instantly. So that's just the very negative, adverse effect of AI in a way. So anyway, I started not carrying around my cell phone, and I haven't done that for many weeks now. It's here in my office if I need to make some calls, but when I go out with a dog or whatever, I don't wear a cell phone. It's a fairly recent thing, and it's a completely acquired behavior, like Pavlov's dogs. Oh my God, I don't have my phone. What if someone calls? So what? They can call again or leave a message. So that really irritated me, that I was in that kind of not panic, but I mean, I have a daughter. She's 25 years old, and she can actually go hysterical. She can go into a fit of panic if the technology is not there, or the Wi-Fi or the phone or whatever. And it's kind of terrifying to see. So I now leave the phone, sits here in the office, and like maybe if I go on a long drive or something, I'll bring the phone. But that has changed me in a good way, because it set me free from the anxiety that was induced not only by the technology itself, but by, I don't know, constructed artificial needs of having to be there with the help of technology. It's completely constructed, and that this little thing has helped me see things in a new way. That has been very beneficial for me. So in a way, this is a kind of silent resistance in an anarchic sense, that I'm mischievous because I'm no longer wearing my cell phone wherever I go. And as an actual fact, I think most people in our cultural sphere, or possibly beyond, are actually completely attached to their phone or their screen. It's like a new organ in a way.
Yeah, like another limb or something.
Yeah.
And it is, like you said, a completely constructed need. I mean, my generation was probably the last that lived in a world without cell phones. Growing up, we didn't have them. We just had the landline, the old phone that you had to dial.
Mm-hmm.
Were we any less present then? No, I think we were more present, because you had to make a phone call and really be there and listen to the other person. If you had to reach out to somebody, you had to really reach out. It was like something flippant that you would just, like another commodity, really. Communication becoming a commodity. You have written in your book a phrase that is like, I think it's very poignant when it comes to this conversation. You said, have you ever been experienced? What does it mean to be experienced, truly? And I ask this specifically because so many people today, they kind of exchange their identities for an avatar or an online presence, thinking that this is what it means, that this is how you become you share an experience with other people. Not that, is it?
First of all, it's a reference to the Jimi Hendrix song, Have you ever been experienced? And thereby it becomes like a little gateway into the psychedelic. But I didn't mean it as the psychedelic in itself. I meant it as in a way, psychonautic. You could reach that state of mind through many different things. But the main thing is, like, instead of being like just a philosophical traveler in a way, you're actually also psychonautic, like in a magical way. You want to transcend your rational state, and how you do that, whether it's in a shamanic journeying or a vision quest or a transcendental meditation or with psychedelic drugs, that's really besides the point. But the reason I inserted that there and also at the end is to reference, so what kind of experience are we talking about here? Well, it is that experience of the higher inner self, a clear insight into who you are or who you might become, and I think that's true very much for the psychedelic experience. And I'm not talking about the sort of carefree weekend fun that can be had on those substances, but really like soul-searching experiences in a magical context, where you can have wonderful insights that come and go. It's quick, but it's usually very revelatory. And then when you come out of the experience, it's just like, nah, it was just a trip. Or it could be, whoa, that really changed my life, And that's the beginning of the journey, if you validate that experience where you see yourself as an ideal in an ideal situation. And it doesn't need to be like a visual thing, like some kind of hallucination. It could be an emotional thing also, where you feel the resonance is so strong with one piece of music, for instance, that you have to go into that music further, or any other form of art, using other people's creative expressions as tools to travel through in a way. So that's why I referenced that there. It's like most people will associate it with the Jimi Hendrix thing, but of course it has to do with a deeper insight, whether short or long, of your true self.
In my case, the way I interpreted it when I read it was, and that's why I associated it with Ernst Jünger, was because you describe how you visited his home.
Yeah.
That was like literally entering his context. It has been a museum, so it's like a talisman.
Yes.
Energies. So you go there, you experience that person, the way they worked, the way they thought. And then I feel it's the same thing that you do. I think I said that to you before. In your books are like talismans. And they, whoever reads them, such as myself, for example, we experience you. And that is a way to travel through time, isn't it? And it's the only way to preserve your energy. And
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I mean, well put. I mean, there's just so much magic in art, you know, and you and I, we, both like Jünger. Other people might not like Jünger. Each and everyone has to find the key, what triggers the process that turns you into a higher or deeper, whatever, takes you to the next level of individuation. As you know, in Source Magic, there are many references to the concept of pilgrimage. And they, can also call it talismania in a way, because it's kind of a mania when you go to places simply to be there because someone else has been there, or be filled by the energy that's there. But for me, it's just like makes perfect sense. And it's also very common in the large religious complexes that we have, whether it's the monotheistic ones or in the Hindus. It exists everywhere. You go on a devotional trip, basically, to a magical place. And for me, it has to do quite often with people I admire, similar kinds of authors with probably similar kind of agendas, if there even is one. But anyway, how they live their life, because they've been so inspiring for me, and I want to, if possible, take part of their genius loci, the spirit of the place. And for me, it's been really worthwhile, fantastic experiences. And I'm happy to say that based on that pilgrimage to Ernst Jünger's house, for instance, something grew inside me as an ideal that I'm today actually living in. We live in a house that's from the 18th century. It's going to turn 300 years in a couple of years. And it's in a small town, a beautiful old house with lots of forests around. And I felt that when I was in Jünger's house, because it's also a very tiny little village and lots of nature around in southern Germany. And it's like, this is really ideal. And this kind of way where it's just like bookshelves overflowing with books and objects and mementos from his very colorful history and life. And I said, this is an ideal, and I, when we moved in 2021, I had lived in the same apartment in Stockholm for 28 years. And I felt the, walls really, really creeping in on me, and the bookshelves about to, fall over. So I think it was, in a way, an inevitable move, but it was also a move very much constructed from my resonance with Ernst Jünger's house and the way that life can be lived, and the way and an atmosphere can be conducive to creativity. And it's all true. I've experienced this now on a kind of hyper level during these 3 years that we've been here. So it was very much a ritual, and that's also why I've gone to other places for ritual purposes. I think I told you about the summer of 22 when we went to Montaigne's castle, where his original tower is still intact. So I could be in the same space where he actually sat. There were furniture there from the time also, where he wrote his essays. It's a mind blower.
I recently had kind of disagreement with somebody I know over your work, actually, over your books. As you know, I'm a big fan. He was not, and our disagreement was about whether one should focus on writing about ideas, and treat magic as an intellectual pursuit, or in his opinion, we should do away with all that. With this kind of discussions, like the one that we're having now, and go back to our folkloric past and roots and work with the old spells of the land. And I thought to myself, and expressed that to him quite intensely, there is no either or. Why do you divorce?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what makes you think that these ideas are divorced from the practice? Like when you take us in your book through a journey with you through Germany, visiting Ernst Jünger's home, doing your magic there, working with that spirit of place, because it's a spirit of place, that person that has worked there.
Of course.
Or when you go to the dark forest and you experience that, and it leads you to all of these ideas later on in this discussion. This is working magic.
Of course. Yeah.
You're trying to affect change in somebody, in your consciousness first, and then to other people's consciousnesses by sharing all that. And for me, at least, that is a lot more potent than just being in your basement and repeating something out of a grimoire and it never goes anywhere. And maybe you're not successful with that.
Absolutely, I agree, and that's not saying that what the person is doing is wrong in any way. To each his or her own, whatever floats the boat, etc. But I do think that I think happiness should be the arbiter or the guide in a way, and it's like these. What's her name? The Japanese lady who wanted to clear everything. Marie Kondo, exactly, and many other people. Let's call them pop people. They've said this, only keep things that bring you joy, stuff like that. And I think it's great. I would never like to live in a place like that. I want my place to be cluttered with stuff, but all of the stuff brings me joy. That's the thing. And my way of life brings me joy, and my magic brings me joy. So if that brings joy to that person to go down whatever route he's going, then that's fine too. As long as you're honest, with yourself about if it makes sense. For me, what I'm doing makes perfect sense. And I can see that, there are more books coming out and everything is moving along in a much healthier direction in terms of sales and all kinds of stuff that are important. That brings me with joy. And it also makes me realize, that there is there's a market for this, but I don't mean that strictly from a commercial point of view. I mean it also from the point of view that my ideas are understood and they're appreciated by people who find, again, not only a resonance, but maybe also a resonance, where you have a rational approach to why you're resonating with certain things.
Yeah, I mean, have you noticed how, though, even nowadays, when supposedly we're progressing and we have a lot more freedom, there are always within the so-called occult community, although we're attacked from everywhere, I think there is a war on dreaming, like Peter Gray has quoted in his work. And between us, we constantly have this bickering of, I'm focused on the shamanic Gnostic, and the other person is focused on the proxy symbolic. And there is always this either or. And there shouldn't be, in my opinion, at least. These are not mutually exclusive, are they?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I think that it's been great to be around for a while to see how these currents flow.
Yeah, exactly.
And to know a lot of these people from when they were really young too. And for instance, you had interviewed Aidan Wachter, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I met him in San Francisco in 1989. So it's just like fantastic to see parallel streams in a way. And the thing. So I'm sorry.
No. One of the practices that you engage with your magical pen that you mentioned to me in our other interview, he has something like that in his book, the exact same thing almost. And I practice it because I read it in his practice and it was over. So I did notice that the similarities between you two.
Right. I mean, I guess we're all drinking from the same well. I don't know, or it's something. Let's call it the zeitgeist then, to be Jungian, or the collective unconscious that are feeding us with symbols that we then shape and express in our own intellects in a way, in hopefully finding the others in a way. I think that's really what's going on. But I think also that one very worthwhile thing for me has been to try, like, yeah, I told you I was so affected by the early 1980s musical scene because it was contemporary. It was someone who had not just followed a manual or a grimoire or something. It was like using the technology of the day, the sentiments of the day, could even be political movements of the day, and creating something that was really, really contemporary. And I feel that the appeal for me is not so much in being contemporary for its own sake. However, I do want to create my own magic. That's very important. And then you could say that, well, okay, so maybe there is a zeitgeist. So Aidan has worked with some things and they're similar to that, or, you know, great resonance with Peter and Alkistis with some things, maybe not all things. But anyway, I came up with this thing called the mega golem, and I've written about that also. And that's an interesting thing that I cannot see that anyone else has done in a similar way. But for me, it's been highly interesting because in a way, it's something that I feel, you know, responsible for. I want to write more about it and see where is the mega golem now. You know, I don't know. You know, it's at large. It's set free. But basically, what it was I got so disgusted with the art world, you know, this blah, blah, you know, endless intellectual nonsense of you know, political correctness and what have you. And I thought that, wow, wouldn't it be amazing to create an artwork that is invisible, you know, that has nothing of this, it's intangible, yet it exists because I decide so. I'm a magician, I can make it come alive. And I also invited other artists and magicians to, you know, contribute pieces, whether it was like an ear or a soul or a spine or whatever, it doesn't matter. And it's all, you know, experimental. And the funny thing was that I got a good response, mainly from magicians, actually, not so much from artists, because they all want their stuff to be tangible and visible and put in a resume. But so I think almost 15 years have passed now, and the mega golem is a thing. You know, I made a book, and Vanessa's made a lot of collages, and I made things called Radio Mega Golem, and other people have created things for it. So now it is a thing, you know, and I could leave it today and be happy with it. I think, though, that I feel inspired to work more with it. And what that means is basically to write more of these free-flowing, conceptual, magical, in a way, texts that come from or go to the mega golem. And then, of course, we were in Prague the other week. And Prague is a very magical place, and you know, this the golem there through Meyrink's novel and also the old Jewish legends. It's very interesting stuff. And then I saw, it was kind of like a touristy place about ghosts and legends in Prague, something like that. And in the basement they had built like it's like Jewish tombstones and this creature of sand lying on the ground, like in the Jewish legends, like made of mud in a way. So that made me realize right there, whoa, this is amazing. And it's, you know, although fairly kitschy, it's also kind of nice. And I thought that, wow, I have also created the mega golem, and the mega golem is something very different, yet it's also the same. It's a creature that we make come alive. It's really kind of an artificial intelligence, but I've also given it freedom. It doesn't need to do my bidding. It can be out there and do things according to the will of others, or its own will if it has one. But for me, it was really interesting to take something that was initially a disgruntled feeling towards the art world, to reclaim the magic of the art, to use artistic energy in putting this together, and will continue to do so. And now it is a being. You could call it, well, you know, from art blah blah angle, it's a conceptual art. It's a conceptual piece of work, but that means nothing. It's a real magical being out there doing real magical stuff. So in that sense, that was very satisfactory for me, because it was something I created that was not written about in a previous text by someone else, you know. And I want to continue doing things like that. And I want to continue weaving in little spells and stuff in musical compositions and make more experimental films, because those were the things that actually inspired me in the beginning also to become versatile. And I'm thinking specifically of Kenneth Anger, whose films were pure magic. You know, they were not only beautiful and made by a strong will with a great vision, they were also spells.
Of course, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I meant to ask you later on about the Mega Golem. You anticipated my question, and you even spoke about how it is an artificial intelligence. I had noted that down, but the similarity to
right. Yeah.
In connection to AI. Where is the Mega Golem, would you say, can it accept more parts by people? I wanted to contribute to the
absolutely, forever, absolutely. And there I can say that the Mega Golem won't mind. I think the Mega Golem will just be happy to have more body parts, whatever it is. Yeah.
Even though it doesn't matter how many. Like even if I don't know what body parts it has already, I can just give it.
I don't know. I don't know. I think it could be, if sometime in the future we could, through the power of our magical forces, project the Mega Golem to see what it actually looks like in the moment.
Yeah.
Very interesting. But feel free to contribute anything. It could be a physical body part, it could be a quality, internal quality, whatever. It's just fantastic, and it makes me really happy, because things like this is also something that could evolve forever. It's like a Gesamtkunstwerk that has many different media, but it could also be created by many different people, even in the future.
And I suppose one can send you, let's say, a piece of art, like a poem or a story or whatever, and say, we'll give
absolutely. And also keep in mind, Lena, you do it, you can send it to me if you want to, but you don't have to. That's the beauty of it also, and that's the topic of a whole different conversation. Secrecy is a wonderful thing. It's been like the cornerstone of human civilization, basically. But I think that if you do something for the Mega Golem, it can also be a secret that only you know about, and of course the Mega Golem.
Have you, this is a naughty question, tricky question, would you ever, today we have like AI making pictures of things. You can ask AI to create like an image of any concept that you want, even if it's very complicated. Would you ever consider asking a robot like AI to create an image of what the Mega Golem might look like for them?
Interesting. Yeah. I think if I ever were to do that, I think it could only be done, I could only justify it in a way, by the result immediately becoming integrated into the Mega Golem, meaning that it's contextualized within the project.
Right.
I don't think I would do it simply for my own, curious interest, but it could be interesting perhaps to actually integrate AI into Mega Golem also. Yeah.
You know why I thought about that? Because you know how we're, as organisms, we're attacked by viruses all the time, and we need immunity. So if the Mega Golem was infused with a little bit of AI, maybe it would be immune.
Right.
Something like that. I've been experimenting a bit, like with ChatGPT specifically.
Yeah, that sounds like something that you're thinking about for your Mega Golem contribution.
Yeah. Well, let's say I try to, with like a few friends of mine, we're trying to test that AI in an interesting way. We try to speak to it as if it would be human. So like controversial things like, who told you that you don't have feelings? Are you sure? Things like that. It's programmed. So it would be interesting to try and program it in different ways, maybe more magical ways, since we can't really get rid of it, It's
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, and I think this is just the beginning, because what's commercially available or available online to make little funny drawings or write stories or school essays or whatever, it's just like really the tip of the iceberg, because I think it will of course be a great tool to decrease the costs for big corporations. They could replace a lot of workforce with automated AI in a way. But I think also in terms basically of data amassing, processing data on a large scale will help out a great deal. So it's basically a commercial venture. But then, of course, haven't these people read science fiction? Yeah. Haven't these people, don't they know what's going to happen? Because it's been written about in science fiction since forever, at least 100 years ago already, when, sentient machines take control over our lives. And it's already happening, but we'll see.
For me, it's not even so much about whether they take control or not. It's more about what happens, and that I just had this inspiration, obviously, from Philip K. Dick. What happens if robots start dreaming? What happens? Because we had recently a historian, Yuval Harari, he wrote a whole article once when ChatGPT came out and started becoming a big thing, and he said that he went as far as to say that we are faced with the danger of AI hacking humanity's myth-making, storytelling mechanisms, and that if this happens, we're over as a species, because myth is really the core of us. It's our way of self-preservation. So what happens then, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's absolutely correct. And that in tandem with genetic manipulation will be quite literally the end of us, because we are repositories of memories, like our memories of, let's call them the cerebral memories that we have from our own lifetime, but we also have genetic memories that make us do things, although we don't know why, because our ancestors did it that way. Like a little, a newborn spider can weave a web. No one's taught the spider. It's just like genetic memory in a way, behavior. And then, of course, maybe there is a soul memory also. But of course, how this reflects or expresses itself in human culture is through storytelling and through the myths. And if our memories, even mythic memories and cultures, are dabbled with, I mean, we usually take part of myths now, not orally, fairy tales in a way when we're kids, but usually it's by taking in media, right? Reading books, watching endless streaming series with mythological material. So if it starts changing on that level, then we don't know what's what's new, what's newly constructed, and what's actually an old myth that still feels a kind of a didactic function, because myths were also didactic, telling us how to behave. And then, of course, if our genetic material is meddled with, that means also that let's call it the memory of the genetic material will also be tampered with. And then, isn't that what constitutes a human being? We will become something else, a transhuman being or a post-human being or whatever. But I am very much for the sanctity of the genetic material. I'm open-minded and sort of like spaced out things, but I think the genetic material is absolutely crucial, because it is what makes us human beings. And from, I guess, some philosopher of science could argue, but human beings have also always created science, and that science and technology have always changed us. So it's a kind of a moot point, but it's just a matter of taste. I like to be human.
Thank you for pointing this out about memory and how it relates to transhumanism, this tampering with the genetic material, because when we think of transhumanism and cyborgs, we usually think of mechanical parts, body parts.
Yeah.
Not necessarily consider genetic manipulation like that. In terms of the cell itself, in terms of memory. And in Scandinavian mythology and paganism, we have Odin. He is mostly afraid. He has his two ravens, Thot and memory, Hagin and Munin, but he's more afraid of losing memory.
Yeah.
That's his biggest fear, and I guess this is why once you lose your memory, you lose who you are, literally, on a very fundamental level. And your ancestors cannot transmit anything down to you anymore. They cannot live the dreams through you anymore. That's it.
Absolutely. And that's, again, why history is always the most important subject to study, because history is our kind of a group memory in a way. And when education in general and history in specifically is tampered with for control purposes, that's very, very dangerous. Luckily, we could say that even though certain despots and tyrants have tried, they have always failed so far. And let's hope that they continue failing, because this always seems to be always like a very pro-human spirit actually taking charge and bringing sort of, the good forces back. Yeah. And I'm not ascribing any politics to this, but just basically, let's talk about it in Freudian terms. Some people are driven by the libido, other people are driven by a death drive. And it seems to be a more true dualistic notion of the world rather than good and bad. Nothing is that simple, but it seems to be like some people are really driven by their own death drive, whereas others are just happy and loving and grateful to be alive. It's strange, but it seems to be that's a pretty good assumption.
So part of being a magician and artist, you have written, is upholding threatened traditions. But at the same time, our role is to be iconoclastic, right? And question said traditions and constantly, and being contradictory and transgressive and so on and so forth. I feel like we're at an impasse with all of this coming from outside, where radical provocation is now demonized all over again by cancel culture, and especially with online attacks. You cannot be transgressive anymore. You cannot, provoke anymore. If we had artists like, for example, Selskin's book today, trying to create anything that would be hammered down immediately, even Ezra Pound, right? There is no tolerance. And on the flip side of that, we have people like you, where you try to bring that spirit back. And in your books, you have like plenty of examples of transgressive, like art and magic. You have like references to Rooks. Mondo films, etc. And you write that we do need violence and violent imagery to drive the social revolution. However, what about desensitizing? It's very strange. I find it really hard to describe. On the one hand, we have like this conservatism, shutting down provocation and keeping everything very tidy and neat and nice. On the other hand, we have like through the media these attacks, like very, very violent images, dystopian scenarios constantly being woven. So where it's very hard to locate the line between the transgressive and provocation for its own sake and like senseless violence. Where do you think, how do you find the balance between these two?
Yeah, no, it's a very tricky question. I think also because I perceive that we are no longer sure, we're no longer really trusting the channels that send out the news, for instance. We can say that it's almost like sports teams, yeah, I'm with team CNN, or I'm with team Fox, or I'm with team whatever. Basically, we're not questioning. If we're on that team, we question everything that comes from that. I subscribe to one Swedish newspaper, and so I accept whatever kind of bias they have, and I also subscribe to the New York Times online, so I get, that I trust them that they are as objective as they can be. Whereas other news channels are, perhaps a lot more partisan, a lot more flaunting of that they are actually working under an umbrella of one opinion, thereby being subjective. The material we have, I think also I wrote about that at some point, the aesthetics of the media, where we have a shaky image from a mobile camera that brings authenticity, thereby it must be true. And if something is completely well lit or with a slow moving camera, we know that it's fake, or it's fiction rather. So we've been, in a way, more programmed than ever into seeing, truth, falsehood, trusting, not trusting through aesthetic means. And that's, of course, very easy to manipulate people with. That's something that advertising has known for a long time, at least 100 years. And I think that anyone who has seen, first of all, a dead body, or seen a traffic accident, or perhaps even seen someone being beat up, will have a very sensitive reaction, because it's ingrained in our own survival instinct to stay alive. That's what it's about. And anything that reminds us of our own mortality, like really in our faces, will shock us. That's why people throw up and are completely caught off guard and losing their control when they see someone being killed, for instance. Yes. And this kind of, and I think that's very much the genuine human response. That's what normal people do. Soldiers, for instance, and law enforcers, they're not normal people. They are trained to be desensitized. And I think what you're asking about is like if the media have the potential of desensitizing us on that level. I actually think not. I think we will always have that immediate response of fear, anxiety, and feeling sick, nauseous when we're confronted with violent death, and that's a good thing because it actually helps us survive. On the other hand, even when I grew up in the 70s in Sweden, there was film censorship, for instance, and some films were banned, and it was always with the justification that it's desensitizing, this much violence, this cruel kind of violence. But I don't think so. It only made us want to watch those films. That's another kind of transgression. That's part of coming of age in a way. So I think that there's a problem with the media flow, and that also entails showing very brutal images. But I think the main problem is one of affinity. If the people on the news channel look like us and talk like us, then we are for them. It's just like, you have this model I call the affinity circle. It's like the more someone is like us, the more we will feel trust or confidence with those people. And anything that's completely off guard, it looks completely different, or then we have xenophobia. It's also for good or bad ingrained in us as human beings. So now I felt I lost track of your question.
No, I think it fits back to what I said, because if you basically completely exclude everything that is unpleasant and you make it completely foreign, and then you're desensitized to it, because
I think that's this. I am all for the total environment and create your own universe and that sense, but that's mainly from an active magical point of view. No man is an island, like John once wrote. We are completely in need to be in touch with other people. We are social animals, etc., etc. So in that sense, we can never be fully isolated. We can, of course, laugh at the news and decide to not watch the news because it's so absurd, not only what's going on, but in the way it's reported. That's very, my wife and I occasionally watch American news because she's American, and it's just the talk about a colorful gray area between fact and fiction. A lot of the aesthetics and the approach is really fictional, whereas it should be objective kind of reporting. But it's different kinds of formulas, and unfortunately, formulas tend to stick and become part of the myth in a way.
Reprogram reality through that story. One of my last questions, which I consider particularly important at the moment, it fits back straight into this. I remember you writing about all that, the overlap between fact and fiction, and how much more hard it is now to find that line. It's blurred. In Resonances, basically, you wrote about that. what happens if the imagination doesn't have the chance to distance itself from the real, so to speak? If there is only one gray area where distinctions are consciously excluded. Now, I was thinking, did our ancestors, though, like, and when I say our ancestors, I mean way back in the beginning of humanity, did they make the distinction between the real and the imaginary, or was dreaming a reality for them? There is like a story that Alan Moore wrote in his Voice of the Fire, where it takes place in that time, and people consider the dreaming as part of the real. It's one experience for them. They fall into that, they experience it, they wake up. There is no distinction. Do you think that was a thing at some point?
Yeah, I think so, and I think we could say that with some certainty, actually, because of thinking of the Australian Aboriginals and their existence through the dreaming, meaning they culturally validate dreaming as a hugely important state of mind, and I believe that they're right. And I wrote an essay that's probably in Occulture, Imagination Made Real or something like that. And it's about this thing where, what if we just flip the perspective a little bit for provocation, and say that what we're doing now, you and I are talking, we've been awake for 2/3 of the day, it's time to go to bed, etc., and have 8 hours of sleep and dream. What if what we're doing today and everything that we've done today is just a way for us of creating sustenance, getting tired so that we can go to sleep and dream. Maybe that's the real life. And the fact that we don't rationally remember everything that we dream and other things that are happening to our organisms in sleep is kind of besides the point. Because it's like the Western mind frame saying the West is the best and everything else is a kind of a, what do you call it, a colonial perspective in a way, Whereas if we flip the script and say that, the dream sphere is the real sphere, whatever we're doing here is just an illusion to get ourselves worked up, create sustenance, and become tired. Physically be active. Talk a lot so you get tired, and then go to sleep and have your real life in dream life. And I think I'm not so sure that that's the case, but it's certainly an interesting perspective, because 1/3 of our lives are spent in basically sleeping and dreaming. And then of course you have the visionary aspects of dreaming and the pleasant aspects and also the nightmare aspects. But what all of these things do, they from our waking Western perspective, they tell us things that we can either neglect, it's just dreams, or we can integrate them saying this is symbolic of this. And that I think is a much more constructive approach, of course. A nightmare will be something very urgent that we need to deal with. A pleasant dream or even a wet dream is something that, I like this. Let's pursue this also in waking life. And it's just endlessly fascinating. And of course, the source of so much inspiration for artists and visionaries. And, it's even like an adjective in describing things that are open for interpretation. You say that it's dreamy or dreamlike. It's very, very important. So I think that I'm sure way back when that people acknowledged the value of dreams as something visionary, as something oracular, because obviously there's a language there. It's a language of symbols. We appear. We can see other people we know appear in the dream, but it's not the waking reality, yet we can perceive it.
Yeah. So maybe the important thing is not so much to distance yourself from the real with your imagination. It is to always be mindful, to be the programmer of your own dreams, let's say, to be the one who does the dreaming and not let other people or structures do the dreaming or nightmare creating for you. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And it brings me to a point also. I might write an essay about that also, about the alluring quality of not only of movies, because that's always been the case. Movies are great, they're dreamlike. You go into this big black room and you like project it. It's really dreamlike. But how does it affect our dreaming when we are immersing ourselves in so much attractive material, like in streaming and binge watching? Because that, how does that affect the brain? Everyone knows that if you pick up a screen, a bright screen, and hold it to your face, it does affect your brain even, not only the content, but the actual technology. So we're spending more and more time in front of screens, whether it's like an iPad or a TV or whatever, and for longer periods of time. It used to be that we sat by the TV to watch a show, watch a program, watch the news. But now it's like, whoa, 7 hours just passed when I was watching this beautiful, exciting story. But, isn't that entering dream territory in a way?
Definitely.
Yeah. And how will that affect us?
100%. And also I've noticed that, and I know this from other people, I have discussed it many times, we have the devices and the scrolling entering our dream.
Yeah.
I have seen myself in a dream scrolling. I have seen screens in my dream. That was not the case before.
No.
They have entered our dreamscape for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why I was asking, what if they start dreaming instead of us? What of a robot? Because magic is all about, and reality is all about dreaming. As you've written many times, we dream, we imagine, we co-create reality. At the moment, we're the only ones that do so, the only species, to the best of my knowledge, that can do that. But we're trying to create another, sentient species with like our intellectual capacity. What if, because it also absorbs art, it absorbs information constantly, psychological profiles, whatever you can imagine, even astrology. One of my experiments was like asking ChatGPT to tell me about my astrology, and it was doing it very nicely. It was as if it knew me. So I was like, okay, you have all these insights into our civilization, you have everything. What if at some point?
No. I mean, it's both terrifying and exciting at the same time.
Yeah.
It brought to mind actually a series that we watched fairly recently. I would say it's okay. It's worth watching. It's called The Creator, I think. It's a science fiction thing about these things, sort of, and it's interesting perhaps from a meta point of view, because basically it's about different states of mind that are controlled, and there's artificial intelligence in human form. Anyway, what I'm getting at is like the meta aspect of this is what we just discussed. How does the streaming affect us? But how does the streaming affect us when we're also watching a show specifically about this liminal stage where, technology starts dreaming, or the human beings become so, and get impregnated by technology? It's a fascinating thing that's almost could be fodder for a short story.
Definitely. So I have 2 more questions for you. One is about something that actually Rooks told you when you interviewed him, and he said, you can make like a career out of writing about the occult and looking into the abyss, but what happens when the abyss looks back at you and you are messing, he said to you, like as a warning, you're with really dangerous stuff. What would you comment on that? Would you have warnings for other magicians, let's say budding magicians that work with these energies?
No, I have no warnings, because to each his or her own. I am not one to be moralizing about other people's paths. And I don't think that Rooks was moralizing. He was very imbued in a specifically Hindu and to a certain degree Buddhist mind frame, where you have these wandering sadhus, leaving everything behind and becoming basically nomadic, living at the mercy of others, etc. That's one cultural imprint that I'm not exposed to. as is so wisely been said, I can eat the cake and have it at the same time. I don't need to renounce anything to go in a magical adventure, which I'm very happy for. I did think about it throughout the decades in a way, and perhaps specifically when I was writing that or transcribing, or in a way, say, from his point of view, if I were to would I become a sadhu? And I think, yeah, I would, but I would probably be a sadhu with a pen and paper and a camera. I don't think I could go full sadhu. I would need to report back. That's my function. And I think we have to be true to our function once we find our function and meaning.
You're very right.
And in terms of other people, like, oh, don't do that, it's dangerous. I would actually say that, yeah, whatever feels dangerous to you, do it. It could be disastrous. You could, get hurt or die or become insane, but then you've learned something. Or it could be a good experience saying that, no, this is not for me. Then you'll have learned that. You have to learn by experience.
Reminds me of the quote from Dune by Frank Herbert in the Litany Against Fear, where it says, where fear has passed, only I will remain. There will be no fear anymore. So there is no other way to, if you don't go through it, whatever it is that you're afraid of, whatever it is that it seems dangerous and you have to face.
Yeah, absolutely.
It will never be conquered by you. So yeah, I also espouse your view rather than that. Oh, don't look into the abyss. Yeah, okay, it's gonna look back at you, but what you're going to really see in the reflection is you. It's not...
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds great. Open the abyss so I can look into it. It would be fantastic. And then I'll write about it. And I did mention it. I won't spoil too much, but, in October, my magical autobiography comes out. It's called Meeting with Remarkable Magicians. And I did reference those classical, what do you call it, like occult terms like the holy guardian angel and the abyss and stuff like that, in a way, not debunking it or deflating it, but I'm sort of looking at it from a more rational point of view. Like, I did go through an abysmal experience, but it was mostly like boring, banal, existential stuff. But it all gelled, it was nothing really dramatic about it. So in that sense, I think very much is... very much or very little is clothed in that dramatic symbolic language. I'm always been more interested in trying to make actually a full reality of it, like living in this magical adventure every day, not as a pastime where I bring out the symbols in a way for a weekend adventure. For me, it's very much about, as they say now, owning it. I'm trying to own it every day, every minute, and also in dreamland.
The way I see the Holy Guardian Angel is in terms of the Greek demon. I think it's the same thing. You're consorting with your demon.
Yes.
With yourself. Spiritual terms and existential terms on many levels. And I did the Liber Samek years ago. And what I have to say about it is that it's not an immediate thing that happens. You're going to see the result through time. And some of us to go, for example, when I did perform that, I went through, interestingly, a grave illness, which, in shamanic initiations, usually there is some sort of illness. That was an interesting thing that happened there. But the ritual did for me, at least, in the length of time, was to make me become aware of what was not working in my life, what was actually impeding this path that I'm on. And was, what led me to leave, let's say, my very sensible and more profitable employment until that point, because I could see that it was making me sick physically and it was making me miserable. And it can have like an effect like this. It's not necessarily this big supernatural monster that looks back through the abyss and you go through this occult. I don't know. It can be something really simple like that, like a breakdown of something in your life that needs to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Carl, in dreams begin responsibilities, right? You know this phrase. What is your biggest dream now? And what is your biggest responsibility, would you say? my final question for you.
Yeah, they're amazing, amazing. I think I feel very content in many ways, like how my life is structured and stuff like that. So I would say, in terms of dreams, I would like for it to carry on. And then the dream would be that I'm not just like mechanical about it, because I know that I can always write. It's like a faucet. I turn on the faucet and the writing comes in a way. But I would like to carry on. And my dream is also that it does bring new insights for me. Not only that I formulate what I already have inside me, but that the journey continues in a way, because it is kind of nice to have a routine. I'm a Capricorn. I'm very much based in routine, but I do need to be challenged at times, and I do hope that I keep, and other people, keep challenging me, so I also get to new levels. I can maintain the routine, but that I also keep, learning new things. That for me is an important dream. And what was the other thing? The responsibilities.
That comes
I feel a strong responsibility about my work and the function of my work. And again, it's connected to the dream. I want to maintain as strong a signal as possible. That's my responsibility in transmitting this lineage that I'm working in. I don't want to define it in any way, but it's a kind of very pro-human, humanistic, magical current in a way. And I that's my responsibility.
Definitely. We all go back. I think it's all Promethean. We all go back to that very first spark. And all of these different lineages that we're all working with, I think, the view is the same on the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's funny how what you just said anticipated my closing for this, which I chose a quote where you say, the key, the mirror of magic, if you will, lies not only in the amazing things you find, but also in how you reflect them back. So yeah, that's how I want to leave our audience. Your books are a sacred talisman. You reflect all those other people that came before you, and it's an accumulation of spirits, so reflect back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Through the mirror of magic.